Welcome to Hand to Hold's 2024 NICU Mental Health Conference. I am Kelly, the founder and CEO of Hand to Hold. For those new to Hand to Hold, we are a national nonprofit 501c3 that is dedicated to providing personalized mental health support, education, and community for NICU and bereaved parents. Support is provided in English and Spanish at no cost to families. More than 2 decades ago, I had 2 babies born preterm. I felt helpless, sad, and alone. I founded Hand to Hold because I wanted other parents to have the support I so desperately needed. Hand to Hold is on track to provide 85,000 sessions of support in 2024 to NICU and bereaved families through our in-person hospital support program, virtual support programs, counseling, and so much more. We believe only another parent of a baby in the NICU can truly understand the trauma, devastation, fear, and anxiety that go hand in hand with a NICU stay. We have 152 hospitals represented here today. Welcome. Almost 600 NICU parents and professionals from 42 states and multiple countries, including Lithuania, UK, Canada, and Australia, are joining us for this very unique conference experience. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, who not only make this conference possible, but also help Hand to Hold provide free early intervention mental health support to parents daily across the country. Our champion sponsors, Reckitt Mead Johnson Nutrition and Huggies Healthcare, are both longtime supporters of Hand to Hold and the NICU families we serve. We'd also like to thank our additional sponsors, Angel Eye Health, Sage Therapeutics and Biogen, Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, and Sobi. We are thrilled to have a representative from Reckitt Mead Johnson Nutrition with us this morning, Jessica Thornton. You'll hear from her in a minute, right after this video.
I am a NICU mom. I had 2 babies that were born preterm and spent a lot of time in the neonatal intensive care unit. My first baby weighed 1.5 pounds, and so was in the NICU for a very long time. I just craved support, but I didn't know where to go to get that support. I founded Hand to Hold to provide support for families in the hospital setting and once they go home. Hand to Hold started in 2009 as a volunteer-led organization, and we've grown tremendously since that time. Now our own national nonprofit 501c3 that is serving thousands of families, not only in Texas, but across the country. Hand to Hold's secret sauce is our family support specialists. They are NICU and bereaved parents, but they are also well-trained. They are certified through the state of Texas as mental health peer specialists.
I believe very strongly in the mission of Hand to Hold because I know that there is power in meeting someone who's gone through a similar story. Having someone who is there with you, who's walked a similar road, is one of the most powerful things that I've ever seen.
That combination of having their own personal NICU experience and that NICU journey, coupled with training and working in trauma, is just a beautiful package and prepares them well to serve families throughout their NICU stay.
Tova was born at 28 weeks and 1 day. And we were told from the very beginning to not expect her to come home before her due date. So she was born in July and her due date was in October. And so we spent a total of 3.5 months in NICU, or 105 days to be exact. You know, that journey was so difficult.
Hey, Kelly, we've had some technical difficulties,
Okay.
which is why I'm stopping it here.
Okay. Would you like to move forward with the introduction for Reckitt Me Johnson?
No, not yet.
Everyone, I'm sorry we're having some technical issues, I'm told. So we're going to take a short break and we will be right back. We appreciate your patience as we fix this tech issue. Thank you. We apologize for that delay and the technical issues. We are going to begin from the beginning. It's not often that we get a do-over in life, so bear with me as we start fresh this morning from the very beginning again. I am Kelly Kelly. I'm the founder and CEO of Hand to Hold. Welcome to Hand to Hold's 2024 NICU Mental Health Conference. We are so glad that you are here. For those new to Hand to Hold, we are a national nonprofit 501c3 that is dedicated to providing personalized mental health support, education, and community for NICU and bereaved parents. Support is provided in English and Spanish at no cost to families. More than 2 decades ago, I had 2 babies born preterm. I felt helpless, sad, and alone. I founded Hand to Hold because I wanted other parents to have the support I so desperately needed. Hand to Hold is on track this year to provide 85,000 sessions of support to NICU and bereaved families through our in-person hospital support program, virtual support programs, counseling, and so much more. We believe only another parent of a baby in the NICU can truly understand the trauma, devastation, fear, and anxiety that go hand in hand with a NICU stay. We have 152 hospitals represented here today. Welcome to all of you. Almost 600 NICU parents and professionals from 42 states and multiple countries, including Lithuania, the UK, Canada, and Australia, all joining from across the country for this unique conference experience. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who not only make this conference possible, but also help Hand to Hold provide free early intervention mental health support to parents daily across the country. Our champion sponsors, Reckitt Mead Johnson Nutrition and Huggies Healthcare, are both longtime supporters of Hand to Hold and the NICU families we serve. We'd also like to thank our additional sponsors, Angel Eye Health, Sage Therapeutics and Biogen, Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, and Sobe. We are thrilled to have a representative from Reckitt Mead Johnson Nutrition with us this morning, Jessica Thornton. You'll hear from her in a minute, right after this video.
I am a NICU mom. I had 2 babies that were born preterm and spent a lot of time in the neonatal intensive care unit. My first baby weighed 1.5 pounds, and so was in the NICU for a very long time. I just craved support, but I didn't know where to go to get that support. I founded Hand to Hold to provide support for families in the hospital setting and once they go home. Hand to Hold started in 2009 as a volunteer-led organization, and we've grown tremendously since that time. Now our own national nonprofit 501c3 that is serving thousands of families, not only in Texas, but across the country. Hand to Hold's secret sauce is our family support specialists. They are NICU and bereaved parents, but they are also well-trained. They are certified through the state of Texas as mental health peer specialists.
I believe very strongly in the mission of Hand to Hold because I know that there is power in meeting someone who's gone through a similar story. Having someone who is there with you, who's walked a similar road, is one of the most powerful things that I've ever seen.
That combination of having their own personal NICU experience and that NICU journey coupled with training and working in trauma is just a beautiful package and prepares them well to serve families throughout their NICU stay.
Tova was born at 28 weeks and 1 day. And we were told from the very beginning to not expect her to come home before her due date. So she was born in July and her due date was in October. And so we spent a total of 3.5 months in NICU, or 105 days to be exact. You know, that journey was so difficult.
The first few hours are a blur and are dizzying and surreal. It was something that you can't imagine, that you can't ever prepare for.
Just seeing how tiny she was and, you know, just seeing all the tubes and wires and monitors and everything was really pretty terrifying. I think for us, being a part of Hand to Hold really gave us, you know, another layer of support.
It is such an isolating, scary thing. I can't fathom what that would have looked like without Hand to Hold.
When we brought Tova home, you know, it was just such a joyous occasion and everybody was so happy for us.
So she's doing wonderfully now. Still a little bit low on weight and a little short, but rapidly catching up.
She's doing really well developmentally. We're just excited to see what else she's able to achieve.
I think all hospitals should provide programs like Hand to Hold and the family support specialist role, because healthcare is hard. And if you have a family support specialist alongside of you while you're caring for the medical needs and they are caring for the emotional and psychosocial needs, it's just the perfect blend of care for baby and parent.
From the beginning to today, it's always been about providing hope for NICU and bereaved families. In order for Hand to Hold to continue to provide free resources and support programs for NICU and bereaved families, we need your support.
If you're going to donate money to a cause, I mean, you are quite literally donating to the future of these babies.
Hello, and welcome to the Hand to Hold NICU Mental Health Conference 2024. I am Jessica Thornton, Senior Manager of Medical Education for Reckitt Mead Johnson Nutrition. I am honored to welcome all healthcare professionals as well as the families today. As a former NICU registered dietitian and a parent, I understand the significant mental health challenges that caring for infants in the newborn intensive care unit brings. As Hand to Hold amply states, the NICU is hard. It is crucial to raise awareness about these challenges and to unite our community in developing actionable solutions that can enhance the lives of infants, their families, and healthcare professionals. Mead Johnson Nutrition is committed to nourishing not only through our innovative and trusted brands, but also through educational efforts. That is why we support Hand to Hold in presenting this valuable 2-day event, which brings together NICU parents and professionals to learn, to discuss, and to inspire advocacy for improving both immediate and long-term mental health of NICU families. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Jessica and Reckitt Mead Johnson Nutrition. Please show your appreciation and support by visiting all of our sponsors' virtual booths today and tomorrow, and up to 30 days after the conference. We have exclusive conference offers from the Hand to Hold online store. You see that cute little calendar right there. I've got mine right here on my desk. You can find that in our online store. We'd love for you to visit our booth to learn more about this inspiring calendar that features more than 50 NICU grads from across the country. 100% of the proceeds from our online store help Hand to Hold support NICU and bereaved parents at no cost to families. We also want to invite you to visit the Hand to Hold booth in the Whova app for more information about all of our free resources for NICU and bereaved families and how we can help you, the NICU professionals here today, care for the families in your NICU. Again, we're glad you're here. We hope that the Hand to Hold NICU Mental Health Conference will serve to elevate the conversation about the need for improved mental health support for NICU parents to ensure better outcomes for babies and their families. We have just a few announcements before we get started. We believe through open, vulnerable, and transparent conversations, we can all learn from one another in service to improving the lives of NICU babies, their families, and the medical professionals who care for them. We really want the conference to be interactive, and we invite you to please participate in the polls, the Q&As, and the chats. And with all of that in mind, in light of yesterday's election day, we ask that you please refrain from any comments or discussions involving the election or politics. Thank you for the time you're dedicating to these important topics this week. We're glad you're here, and we hope you walk away inspired and energized. We're going to welcome our keynote speaker in just a moment, but first I want to announce the winner of our NICU Hero Individual Award, sponsored by Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals. The Hand to Hold NICU Hero Award recognizes NICU professionals and NICU units that deliver outstanding family-centered care. It is an honor to recognize Hand to Hold's NICU Hero Individual Award recipient for 2024, Dr. Sue Hall. Dr. Hall is a retired neonatologist and former medical director who began her career as a social worker, touching countless lives throughout her journey. Dr. Hall stands out among so many because of her keen interest in and support of family-centered care. But before family-centered care became well known throughout neonatal and pediatric care. Early on, Dr. Hall recognized that parental presence and active participation in the baby's care was critical to improving outcomes for babies and their families. In addition to her work as a practicing neonatologist, Dr. Hall wrote the book For the Love of Babies, One Doctor's Stories About Life in the Neonatal ICU. In addition to this book, Dr. Hall has authored countless medical journal papers on the importance of family-centered care in the NICU and spearheaded an interdisciplinary effort through the National Perinatal Association to develop recommendations for the psychosocial support of NICU families. As an outreach of that work, she spearheaded the development of My NICU Network and My Perinatal Network, which are online educational platforms that provide continuing education to perinatal and neonatal healthcare workers about how best to support parents in the care of their babies. And possibly most importantly, she has invited NICU parents like me and countless others to present in partnership with her at national conferences, giving NICU parents a real chance to share our insights and wisdom with the broader neonatal community in an effort to improve family-centered care practices across the country. She is beloved by all in the NICU community for her work to ensure the care of the family is just as important as the care of the baby. She is a true NICU hero, and we are honored to recognize her impact in the lives of NICU babies and their families. Welcome, Dr. Hall.
Thank you so much. I want to show, it doesn't show very well, but I have this beautiful plaque, I guess you would say. And I want to thank Kelly and other members of the selection team for recognizing my work and bestowing this honor on me. I fully believe that working together, hand in hand, we have improved mental health outcomes for parents and their babies and made families undeniably stronger and more resilient. I was happy to play my part in educating NICU staff about the importance of involving families in the care of their fragile and often premature infants. And I know that the NICU parent community is well organized and strong in carrying this work forward and advocating for themselves and their peers who are forced to take the NICU roller coaster ride. I wish all the best for members of this community with whom I have forged strong and lasting relationships. Thank you for the opportunity to have collaborated, and thank you again for this award. I'm deeply appreciative.
Congratulations, Dr. Hall. You truly are a NICU hero, and we are grateful for all you do for NICU babies and their families. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I am thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Benjamin Rattray. Dr. Rattray is a neonatologist and the medical director of neonatal intensive care at the Cone Health Women's and Children's Center in Greensboro, North Carolina. He is the author of When All Becomes New, a doctor's stories of life, love, and loss, a book of patient stories about the intersection of empathy, faith, and the sacred privilege of drawing near to families in times of crisis. As a neonatologist, Dr. Rattray takes care of babies in the NICU. As a writer, he is fascinated by the way stories shape our lives, bind us together, and make the world what it is. He believes that stories can help us notice the magic of daily moments, mitigate physician burnout, and infuse medical practice with empathy, and humanism. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rattray.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. A big thank you to Kelly, to Hand to Hold, to the sponsors, and for everybody who's signed into this conference right now. Thank you for what you do as parents, as healthcare professionals. And I just wanted to start off by saying, number one, just a trigger warning that some of the things that I'm about to speak of include loss and suicide. And also to preface everything with, this is very much an aspirational talk. These are things that I would aspire to and not things that I do on a daily basis as much as I would like to. So with that, I will get started. Okay, so starting out, the first thing is how I got into medicine in the first place. My mom is from England, and she started as a midwife in England in the 60s and 70s. moved to New Zealand and worked as a registered nurse, outpatient. So she would drive around and visit families that were patients that were discharged. She would do Meals on Wheels, IV therapy, antibiotics, all those sorts of things. And sometimes as a kid on a day off, I would get to go around with her. Um, and meet her patients and see what she was doing. And at first, it really terrified me as a child seeing some of the sick patients. So I think initially I was quite afraid of medicine. And then over time, especially during my college years, I became much more interested in it. The way that I initially really learned about medicine was by reading books. So I had a college friend whose father wrote this book that you'll see in the middle, The Closest of Strangers. He worked as a family physician, and this book details his interactions with his patients. Um, I also loved this other book, When the Air Hits Your Brain, which is a Tales from Neurosurgery. And I loved kind of the excitement and the way that healthcare professionals were able to make immediate difference in people's lives. So I think it was really that juxtaposition of meeting families, meeting patients, getting to know them, getting to hear about their stories, especially stories that other people don't necessarily get to share in, as well as the ability to make an immediate impact. And that's actually really what drew me into neonatology, because we get both of those things. Sometimes we need to do things quickly, and we end up in emergency situations, but we also have the benefit of spending time with patients and families, usually getting to know them over a period of days, weeks, and months. So that's what I really loved about that. Put in this slide because I think this was kind of my idea, this sort of Norman Rockwell idea of medicine, where you had time to think, time to forge these connections, and time to really be with your patients. And that brought me to the reality. So I ended up in a training program where I was working about 80 to 100 hours a week, which was pretty standard at the time, and found that some of these pictures that you'll see up on the screen were the reality. So one of the things is the electronic health record, which was actually just coming into phase during my training. We started out writing notes by hand, and then this found its way into medicine. Also, sick patients, exhaustion, and the grief that comes with difficult outcomes. And so what I found is that you have this combination. You have initially this existential suffering of patients, and then you put on top of it some of the other constraints of medicine, whether that's the business and logistics. So for example, trying to make sure that there's productivity in medicine, looking at different payer mix with insurance, insurance denials, which can take up a lot of time and a lot of stress, and the electronic medical record, which is a great source of information, but also uses up a lot of time in terms of data entry. Also, now what we're seeing is venture capital moving in, swallowing up physician practices, and a lot of the economic uncertainty and difficulty that comes with those acquisitions. Also, on a personal note, for most people, massive student loans that they've taken out, looking at call schedules for the NICU and a lot of other places needing to provide that 24/7 coverage, staffing shortages, especially during COVID, but both before and after as well. And then another very significant aspect to practicing medicine in the US is the threat of litigation. And all of those things can lead to moral injury, because what we see is it impacts our patients, and in the sense that we can't always provide what we want to provide. We can't provide the time and the energy and the focus because of all of these competing factors. And it also can erode from time with our own families, and personal time, and just kind of the impact on your personal life. And so trying to balance all of these things, often, you get a little out of you get off kilter on one side, it impacts something else. And so it's always trying to mitigate against those things. And then this is the mold that most physicians are made with. Um, this idea that we should be unaffected by everything that goes on, that we should have these kind of bulkheads like you have in a ship, these watertight compartments. And so you just compartmentalize everything. Um, that kind of allows you to work those 80 or 100-hour weeks. The idea is that you're just professionally detached and everything that there's just scientific truth behind everything, and that's really what the focus should be on. And what that looks like in practice, I'll never forget during my residency, I ended up running a code for a baby who died in the emergency room. And then about sort of 10 minutes later, I was onto the next patient in the next room working up a child with a rash. And so we're just kind of going from one thing to the next with no real kind of decompression in between, no break. There's just this expectation that you should be able to just keep moving and keep doing what you need to do. In the NICU, that can look like going from one delivery to the next, or a code in the NICU straight down to another, preterm delivery. And then along those lines, both the explicit and sort of underlying idea here is that emotions are to be avoided. The consideration that emotions are self-indulgent, they're untrustworthy, and that if you're not careful, can lead to compassion fatigue, and they represent a professional failure. And that any time that you spend on self-reflection can detract from both your learning and the responsibility that you have towards your patients. One of the things that I love about literature is it helps us put words to things that you can't necessarily identify or articulate yourself. There's this beautiful short book by Claire Keegan, who's an Irish author of this book, Small Things Like These. And in this beautiful book, she paints this very significant moral challenge that the protagonist comes up against. But one of the quotes from here is just this feeling of purposelessness that he feels. He says, "What was it all for?" Furlong wondered. The work and the constant worry, getting up in the dark and going to the yard, making the deliveries one after another, the whole day long, then coming home in the dark and trying to wash the black off himself, and sitting into a dinner at the table and falling asleep before waking in the dark to meet a version of the same thing yet again. Might things never change or develop into something else or something new? I think this is really pertinent as we think about mental health, because one of the most significant and powerful things that Kelly was talking about at the beginning is hope. Hand to hold really represents that chance for hope for families and help for staff in the NICU. And it's the sense of purposelessness that's so damaging and difficult for our mental health. One of the things that we're looking at so often now is the toll that this can have on people. Sorry, just significant rates of burnout. We're looking at over 50% of clinicians at this point are burned out. A quarter are suffering from depression, and even as severe as clinical depression. And also 10% of physicians consider or attempt suicide. This is something that's exceptionally close to my heart because I had somebody who I was very close to in residency. He was a resident who was 1 year below me in training, who committed suicide during our training. And there were no warning signs. He was very happy-go-lucky. And so at first I really didn't believe it when I heard the news. I'd seen him the day before. We talked about kind of his next plans. And the next day I was on call in the NICU and I heard the news and immediately went into a very, very strong denial where I just didn't believe it. it really didn't impact me for a number of hours because I simply didn't believe it. Um, and so this is obviously something that is very significant to healthcare. And I knew that he was under a lot of pressure, like all of us. Um, but there just were no warning signs, and it's something that I write about in the book as I try and work through that. I still think about him very regularly and wonder where he would be now, where he would be in life, if he would have kids, all of those kind of things, if we would still be in touch. Um, and it's something that I try and keep front and center as I'm meeting trainees and other people around the hospital, something to watch out for. So I reached a turning point, and I was on call late one night and sat down at the computer, kind of looked out the window. I put this slide in here because I was looking out at our parking lot. I was looking at the orange glow of this parking lot. Um, And I just started to write down stories. I had all of these stories that had sort of built up in me over the years. Um, and I just started to put them down on paper. Um, I think as a way of capturing those ideas, capturing the stories. And before I knew it, I was just writing and writing. So for me, this was the paradigm shift. As the incidence of physician burnout soars, the attempt to capture truth and humanity in story can help us to notice, to draw near, to bear witness. Stories can moor us when feelings of despair and guilt and futility crest. Um, and the reason that this was a paradigm shift for me was it helped me move past just the purely technical aspect of how to save critically ill babies. Up until that point, I've been so focused on trying to achieve the best outcomes that we could, trying to make the best decisions, learn as much as possible, um, that I really hadn't taken the time or really seen um, these backstories. I certainly had always enjoyed interacting with families and had a good rapport with families. Um, but to me, the way that I viewed this was almost like a war. So it was like our job was to save the baby, and nothing else mattered. It was really almost this underlying expectation that for those that made it through, they should be thankful and relieved. But what I was missing was the profound impact that the NICU has on families, and the PTSD that people, can experience. Um, and it was really only by writing these stories down, and even talking with parents years after their preterm delivery, um, that I began to the curtain was pulled back, and I began to see how PTSD, marital stress, financial stress, and long-term healthcare challenges were affecting families. Um, and just realizing the importance of care and empathy, that you can't take care of patients with technology alone. You have to support people's minds and spirits. And that's a lesson that I feel like I'm trying to learn each and every day and put it into trying to apply it every day. I know it's the right path, and so it's just kind of a daily challenge to try and meet families where they are and always try and have that empathy. There's an amazing book called In Shock by Dr. Raina Oddish. She is an adult critical care physician who ended up in her own ICU. She was actually pregnant, had a massive liver hemorrhage, ended up in her own ICU. And what she found was very much that the medical care that she received was excellent. Um, but she really found the care lacked that empathy, the way that people talked about her when they thought that she was sedated and couldn't hear, the lack of information that she was getting, and the lack of support as a patient. And it really kind of flipped the way that she saw things. And she realized that the way that she had been instructed was kind of like I was talking about before, that she'd been taught to distance herself from patients. And she'd been taught that connection would lead to loss and disillusionment and burnout. And so the idea really was just don't get close. And all of a sudden, when she ended up in her own ICU as a patient, she saw how that plays out as a patient. Another book here is Every Deep Drawn Breath by Wes Eli. He is actually also an adult critical care physician. Um, the title comes from Steinbeck's East of Eden. Um, And in that book, he talks about there's something so gorgeous and unique about the human condition, if we can respect the dignity of who people are. And what he really finds is that when people are sedated and immobilized and depersonalized in the ICU, it masks their human dignity, and masks who they are as people. I think that's one of the great things in the NICU when we have these pictures up of babies' families, the pictures of the siblings or the picture of the family dog, the picture of the parents, out on a date or picture of the house, all of these kind of things that when we enter that room, it gives us a chance to see the backstory, for their life. It's definitely just a powerful reminder. Of everybody involved in this baby's life. One of my favorite authors is Anthony Doerr, and he makes some really interesting points about science and art and the way that we often think about them in the West as being completely, mutually exclusive fields. The way that he sees it is that fundamentally artists and scientists are concerned with an identical proposition. Which is trying to describe the world as they see it, both attempt to understand what it means to be human. So he talks about the college campus, how you have biology labs are held in the science building, drawing classes are held in the fine arts building a half a mile away. And artists are urged to work with passion and ardor, where scientists are urged to work with detachment and aloofness. So he says, put on the white coat, leave your emotions at the locker, right? He believes that these divisions are arbitrary. The perception that science and art are mutually exclusive is useless. And so really, what I believe is that marriage between science and literature makes us human. So the question is, when we look at narrative medicine, which is setting down these patient stories and writing with empathy towards patients and families, the question is, can it really help us? And I think it's really understanding to have some, or understandable to have some cynicism about that. Right now, we exist in a corporate system. But the problem is, we're not pushing something down a production line. We're not entering numbers into a spreadsheet. We're taking care of people with, feelings and hopes and dreams. And so I think if we put literature and medicine back together, that's how we preserve the human side of medicine and process our own role in the system. Kind of a way that I think about this in terms of the corporate system is, I can see a 14-year-old give birth in a confidential room with a confidential name to protect her security. But what the company sees is just the CPT billing code, that comes through on the billing software. So there's this big division between, what we see in the front lines, and then of course what the corporate medical structure and system sees. And so the question is, why should we share stories? And really, the reason is that medicine is relational. It's always about a relationship that we have with our patients and families. And illness and disease present existential issues for patients and healthcare providers. That's why it's so important to have an organization like Hand to Hold, because we come up against this significant suffering. And one of the things that literature allows us to do is observe, think, and talk about human interactions, often in a way that we can't do otherwise. It allows us to look at the depth and complexity and nuance um, in a kind of a quiet, reflective way. So one of the quotes that I really like by Grossman from Individual Languages, I write and feel that the correct and accurate use of words acts like medicine. And then from Dr. Sharon, who was the founder of narrative medicine, she says that we read books and watch films in part to discover ourselves, to measure our own experience against fiction, and consider our lives from new and different perspectives to thicken our own stories. So some of the benefits to this reflection of mindfulness, we can actually improve our healthcare team function. They've shown in studies that one of the most effective ways for team to function is when people on the team have empathy towards each other. So we're understanding of each other's roles, but also understanding of the challenges. We have this shared mental model for how we want to work together. Um, and, we have this kind of safety net where we can work together, we can fail, we can be vulnerable, ask for help. It also lets us recognize emotion. This can be a big issue because sometimes the more stress and the more sort of mental health challenges we have, numbness can be a very significant part of the way that we can feel. And when you start to get numb, it's so much harder to have empathy and it's hard to interact with the people around you in a positive way. And it's hard to have that self-care and compassion that you need as well. Um, so some of these things, the reflection of mindfulness can help us deepen our empathy. And then of course that can lead to decreased burnout and also help us to tolerate uncertainty. Uncertainty in the NICU, of course, is a real challenge because we never know what the outcome is going to be. And so we're always living with a tremendous amount of uncertainty. One of the things that it can help us do as well is to notice. Um, so we talk a lot about familiarity. So the easier the experience or the more entrenched, the more familiar, the fainter our sensation of it becomes. This is true of chocolate and marriages and hometowns and narrative structures. And so the author of this book, Four Seasons in Rome, Anthony Doerr, was given a fellowship to go to Italy and spend a year there. And what he finds is that in Italy, he was moving from Idaho. And so everything was so unfamiliar to him, whether it was just trying to order, a sandwich in the local shop, order flour, or just move around the city. Everything was so unfamiliar. And if you read this book, Four Seasons in Rome, you just see how all of a sudden his eyes are open to everything. And that really is the goal for us as well. So as healthcare professionals, um, if you're a nurse or a doctor in the NICU, that's kind of like our second home. We spend so many hours in the NICU that it can become very familiar to us. Um, and it's harder for us to see the NICU through the eyes of, say, a new NICU family, or some of the things that we really become quite desensitized to, like having a baby on a ventilator, can be so incredibly jarring for parents, when they come in and see that. So that's one of the things that I try to remember is to not be so familiar and try and notice the things that the parents would notice, or even notice things for myself. Um, for me, the most powerful example was my dad was working in Hong Kong for some years. And so my wife and I went to visit him. And going through the open air market was such an unfamiliar experience for us. All these different sights and smells. And all of a sudden, it's like your senses come alive and you're just you feel like you're just noticing so much more. Um, and so once again, what I try to do is bring that sort of experience into the NICU. And so when I'm looking at this baby, am I really noticing this baby for who the baby is? Noticing their family, noticing, like I said, those pictures on the wall. Um, so instead of it just being another baby to round on, um, just trying to notice as much as I possibly can. And like I said at the start of this is all very aspirational, not that I necessarily do this every day, all day. And once again, Anthony Doerr says a good journal entry, like a good song or sketch or photography, ought to break up the habitual and lift away the film that forms over the eye, the finger, the tongue, the heart. And Raina Oddish, in an essay called The Subway from Chest magazine, says, close observation is a form of devotion. And part of this, especially when it comes to writing, is not so much telling, but showing. Um, and I think that this can be true in our daily lives as well, as trying so much to notice those details. Um, Here's a book by a surgeon, Confessions of a Knife. And you can see in this quote all the things that he's trying to notice and the empathy that he's bringing to this patient. Even now, after so many weeks, he marvels at the smallness of her head. It is so tiny and finely veined, no more than a pale knob, really, or a lamp of milk glass etched by the suture lines of the skull. And it's so interesting to have this surgeon's perspective. He's not just, this isn't just a patient that he's operating on. And so here's really the paradox, I think, for us. We call it the empathy paradox. And really what it is that when we draw near in grief, it can connect us in ways that protect both the patient and the physician. So it sort of turns on its head that training that we get to be professionally detached and to steer clear of emotion. And as actually the keynote speaker for Hand to Hold last year, Dr. Stern, who's a neurosurgeon, wrote in his book, emotional agility allows the surgeon to operate with dispassionate objectivity one moment and move towards intimate connection the next as the situation demands. So for me, what this looks like is, say, I'm placing a breathing tube in a 450-gram baby in the delivery room when the heart rate's down. In that particular moment, I really do need to be very dispassionate. Sometimes, in a flash, I'll look across the room and I'll see the parents and I'll think for a second, what if we can't get the tube in? Or how are the parents feeling? And what I have to do in that moment is turn that off, and really just have a focus on what we're trying to do, which is get that breathing tube in. But then once the tube's in and the heart rate's up, at that point, I need to try and switch and then move into connection with the parents, leading the father over to the isolette, explaining what's going on, how the baby's doing, moving over to the mom in the OR and doing the same thing. And so the goal is to try and have that agility to be able to move back and forth between those two things. And then also accepting life's beauty, which is inseparable from its fragility, which is something that I think is exceptionally difficult to do, but certainly important. The way that I learned this lesson is that one day, just with a patient, everything went wrong. The baby's heart rate, basically the blood pressure just slipped and slipped. We turned all the pressors up. We did everything we could, and then the heartbeat just faded away. And I was left standing at the bedside with just nothing that I could do. And a little uncharacteristic for me, I offered the mom a hug as that baby passed away. There's just nothing else to do. She was a single mom, alone, just weeping. And my heart really broke for her. And what I found in that moment is that as I extended that compassion, it actually allowed me to accept compassion from her and almost like forgiveness from her for something that I couldn't control. One of the things I think that we really struggle with in healthcare um, are just these profound feelings of guilt. So we feel so guilty even when we've done everything that we can, even when we feel like we've done everything right. We feel so much guilt for these outcomes. Even if we've used up, all the pressors, we've used up everything we can do. There's still this feeling of failure. We always have this feeling of extreme ownership, which I think is good and important. Um, but it cuts two ways, and it means that we feel a tremendous burden and weight and guilt. And I think that this empathy paradox and this connection means that we can actually receive forgiveness from families, um, which is incredibly important. One of the ways that I think that writing or any art form can do for us is also that we just bear witness to the things that we see. So Ford Madox Ford in The Good Soldier says, "You may well ask why I write, and yet my reasons are quite many. For it is not unusual in human beings who have witnessed the sack of a city or the falling to pieces of a people to set down what they have witnessed for the benefit of unknown heirs or of generations infinitely remote, or, if you please, just to get the sight out of their heads." So another author, Tim O'Brien, wrote a book, The Things They Carried, which are stories from Vietnam. And what he does here is he sets up the situation that doesn't happen. This is just an imagined idea that the soldier has about coming home and then talking with his father. And so he just, in his mind, he sort of has this narration where he says, "You really want to hear this?" And he says, "Hey, I'm your father." Um, and then the soldier smiles and he looks out across the lake and imagines the feel of his tongue against the truth. "Well, this one time, this one night out by the river, I wasn't very brave." Um, and what Tim O'Brien does with this story is it's very constructed to show how much the soldier needs to be able to share with his father and have this acceptance, from his father. What Tim O'Brien calls is story truth, and his stories are often part true and part fiction, and he kind of molds the narrative to make it the most powerful. Um, Camus says the fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth. Um, and so it's a way of, and my book is narrative nonfiction, so it's all entirely true. But certainly, if in a work of fiction, you can sometimes come at some of these really deep mental health issues in a fictional way, but a very powerful way. When we look at Hemingway's Iceberg from Indian Camp, what we find is that there's a physician who, from a technical standpoint, achieves an amazing feat where he does a C-section really with minimal medical supplies, and he saves the baby. And you can see how pleased and really how proud he is with his ability to do that. But Hemingway shows us how much that physician is missing, because he says, talks about the proud father and usually the worst sufferers in these little affairs. And so what you see with this iceberg idea is that below the water, there's this massive depth of the suffering that the patients go through. And Hemingway really shows how oblivious the physician is to all of that in this moment. And going back to mental health and the guilt that we feel, is this idea that the good outcomes don't outnumber the bad in terms of the impact. So from a numerical standpoint, they may. From an accounting standpoint, you may have more good outcomes than bad, and thankfully in the NICU we do. But what Raina Aldish says is that, those good outcomes don't make even the slightest dent in the darkness that bled from the bad ones. That shame is unique in its wholeness, an impenetrable black orb that deflects light. So we talk about guilt and shame as providers when we can't achieve the outcome that we would want to achieve. So one of the chapters in my book is called The Sniper's Son. And that's definitely something that I wrestle with. We had a sniper who came home on leave to see his premature baby, but unfortunately his baby ended up having very significant necrotizing enterocolitis and quite quickly died. There was nothing that we could do. And standing in that room with the sniper in his uniform and the people from his unit, and then withdrawing our support for the baby was just a really profound experience, and certainly fed into a lot of guilt about not being able to save that baby. So the argument is that some of these softer things that we quote unquote soft allow us to notice, to draw near and bear witness. And they help us remember that we're never truly alone. Despite how dark the hospital can be at night, with the sun is down, there's less people in the hospital, less support. We're still never really alone. And it can help us take away those compartments. We think back to those bulkheads in the ship that are supposed to stop the whole ship from flooding. That idea of compartmentalization. But we can get rid of those flimsy compartments that really don't work anyway, and move into that empathy paradox, and allow ourselves to feel in ways that we can have empathy, not only for our patients, but also for our colleagues, and probably most important, actually, for ourselves as well. And then when we recognize ourselves in others' greatest joys, darkest moments, grief, embarrassment, fear, and elation, we become resilient. And when we are resilient, then that lets us provide stronger clinical care. And so once again, coming back to this book, Small Things Like These, the narrator reaches this crossroads where he has to make a decision. And what he says is there any point in being alive without helping one another? Was it possible to carry on along through the years, the decades, through an entire life without once being brave enough to go against essentially what is there, for someone? And so I think that that's what we find in healthcare. There's this tension between what we feel we need to do in our profession, also in a sustainable way. And stories can help us wrestle and find the tension between these things. Okay, so I've talked a lot. What I'm going to do right now is we're going to do a quick writing exercise. So go ahead and grab a pen and paper, and think about, over the past week, was there something beautiful or disquieting? How did you notice, draw near, or bear witness? I'm going to set the timer for about 8 to 10 minutes. And then I'll turn my video back on, and we'll go into question and answer. And in that session as well, if anybody wants to share, then that would be a good venue to do that. Okay, everyone. Hopefully, I gave you enough time to at least jot down a couple of things. We are going to move on to our question and answer portion. Definitely feel free to leave some of your thoughts and ideas in the comment section. And then also feel free to ask any questions as well. So I'm looking at one of the questions is asking about narratives. And when we're in adversity, we often rely on narratives for guidance on how to get through things, but sometimes those narratives don't serve us well. Um, Sorry, the rest of it went away. Here we go. And then asking, is it something that I share with families and staff about witnessing and story truth? I'm certainly much more open now than I was in the past to kind of sharing my personal story with families and also just sharing some of these ideas and concepts. Um, and I think it's important because families have such a powerful, important story, and it's something that they can share with people as well. So that's the answer to that question. Let's see, are there any other questions or comments?
Dr. Rattray, I'll jump in here. Actually, I can't see you. Do you mind
Oh,
back on
I'm
camera?
sorry. This is
That's okay. I know we got a lot of tech issues going on this morning, just trying to work it all out. But if you can come back on so we can finish out strong here, I will tell you there's been a lot of chat about everybody wanting this list of your books. So I'm hoping that you'll share that with us, and we can share that with all of our audience. But I told you before we started just the impact your book had on me. And I waited 2 years to have you speak for us because of your very busy calendar. But I had actually noted a place in here. You talked a lot in the book about kind of imposter syndrome. And I don't know if you might want to speak to that just a little bit because I think medical professionals certainly but I also felt like an imposter in the NICU. I really became the cheerleader. I was so much more positive in the NICU than I really felt. I felt I had to put on a certain persona to be seen as a good parent, and that my baby would get the best care if I had almost a different personality than what I was truly going through. And I know what a disservice that did to me. I learned that in therapy many years later of masking my true emotion. So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Imposter syndrome is such a significant thing. I think for so many people, in healthcare and probably outside of healthcare as well. And it's so interesting because, after going through 14 to 18 years of training, coming out, having over a decade of experience, and you can still feel like an imposter. You get in these kind of situations with patients and families where you think, do I know what I'm doing? Am I the right person, to be in this situation? And it's definitely quite, it's very unsettling when you are in that kind of when you have those feelings. Um, and I see it really in a pervasive way for so many people, people that think, should I be in this leadership role? Should I be, the one at the bedside in the middle of the night caring for this baby? That sort of a thing. And so, um, yeah, it's definitely something that can be difficult to deal with. And I can see too, even as a parent myself, sometimes you feel like, it was my parents knew what they were doing in a way that I'm not sure that I know what I'm doing. And then you really do realize that we're all in the same boat. We're learning as we go along. We're doing the best we can. And that's where, having some kind of self-compassion probably plays into this.
Now let's talk a little bit more about that self-compassion. I think kind of a review of what we talked about today of how do NICU professionals care for their mental health as they're caring for the patients. And I know it's similar for the NICU parent, right? And how we're caring for our mental health throughout the NICU journey. So I think some of the things I picked up from you today certainly are about journaling, and I hope that that exercise was impactful for everyone. I know I move so fast, I don't notice oftentimes. But it is something that I very much respect and value about our family support specialists who are working in the NICUs, because like you said, they get to know these families and know their stories and notice their emotions and their feelings and are there to support them throughout that journey. But it seems like for you, art and literature and writing are all important things for your mental health and juggling the demands of your profession. Are there other things that you might want to list for our NICU professionals as they're thinking about how they might begin to take more time in caring for their own mental health?
Yeah, so I think it is, going to be very, very personal, for people. There's some people that, love to craft. I love to hike. So I find, just getting out in the woods and walking the dog, I can let her off the leash and she runs around and, I can see the lake. That's a really important thing for me is to get outside into nature, get the sunlight, and move outside. So yeah, so that's definitely something. Spending time with family is another really good grounding thing as well. So I think it'll look different for everyone, but just trying to figure out, for you what that looks like. I'm sure people could put a lot of really interesting things in the comment section about things that they find helpful. And then, we're probably all a little different in terms of being introverts or extroverts. I definitely get more energy from kind of sitting down and reading and as more of an introvert. I'm sure for some people going, out to coffee with a couple of friends, could probably really fill their cup. No pun intended. So yeah, probably a little bit different for everybody.
And then I don't know if you are watching the chat, if there's more Q&A, but real quickly, one of the things that really spoke to me in your book is about closing the gap between the professional and the parent. And that's one of the reasons why I so badly wanted you to come and speak today, because I do just really appreciate the empathy you had for the mom that you talked about earlier and hugging that parent and allowing some of those barriers, the bulkhead, if you will, of allowing those emotions to come through. I think for us as parents, it helps us see how much you truly care about our babies. We're not just another admission, another number, and that you are doing all you can as a human to care for our babies and for us. So are there other things that you're doing in your unit to help ensure that not just you, but those in your practice are trying to have more empathy and compassion and allowing those barriers to come down so that they can connect with families?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, and these sound like these are, sort of basic but important things. So on our rounding sheet, we always write the baby's name, so that we can use the baby's name. And then under the social part of our note, jot a couple notes about the family, whether it's siblings or moms going back to work or things that can just kind of jog our memory and help us remember, some of the things that are going on, in their lives. We're also working on a pilot program to have a NICU psychologist embedded in the NICU. And I saw from the agenda, it's something that other people are talking about as well. But that's something that's really important to us. And so I think that's going to help. And I think that, psychologists can help both the staff and the families. And then, a lot of other things. I mean, the nurses do an amazing job with, the crafts that they put up, all the footprints and all that kind of stuff. So I think all of those things can help.
Yes, that certainly did normalize the experience for me. I loved coming in and seeing the different signs and, hip hip hooray, he weighs 2 pounds today. Like just knowing that they were celebrating those milestones with us was so important. Hand to Hold, really talks a lot about milestones. We actually have a milestone bead program, and helps parents to, look forward to that next milestone of changing the diaper, bathing the baby, clothing the baby, big parenting milestones, and helping them bond with their baby and celebrating those things. And it's a great teaching tool for NICU professionals, and using that with parents. So, celebrating all the milestones, I think, is so important for the parent, but also for the professional of seeing the babies as they progress through their NICU journey. Were there any other questions that we need to address? I want to make sure I'm not taking up other people's time.
Yes, I'm going to look in the somebody okay, so somebody said as a former preemie myself and now NICU social worker, former 26-weeker, I shy away from sharing my personal experience with families and providers. Any thoughts on how I can open up? Um, I think that's a great question because, these things are really difficult. We talk about that time that I gave the mom a hug. I think you have to be so careful about, is this somebody who wants to, interact with you in that way? And so, when we share stories, sometimes we can have some really difficult stories or some really positive stories and trying to understand, is this the right story for the right time? But I think to answer the question, that can be incredibly encouraging to somebody to see you as a social worker, especially the fact that you were born at a time when technology and medical care wasn't what it is today. I think can definitely give people hope. So I think you can be open to sharing that story, just sort of, at the right time and place. And I think that can be very encouraging.
I'd like to second that. I think, that is when I talk about the secret sauce of our family support specialists, it is that they are saying they are a NICU parent, they have had a similar birth experience, and we're able to share our stories. And they're not all shiny outcomes. For me, I was encouraged to actually go to a NICU reunion while my baby was still in the NICU. But my neonatologist wanted me to go and see children who had been born as early as my son. And I didn't see all perfect children. I saw children with different medical issues and different abilities, but they were all happy and they were having fun and they were family. And so it helped me kind of process and understand that my child could still have a very happy life, even if there were ongoing medical issues or challenges past the NICU. So I just encourage that social worker and she'll know when it's appropriate because that's her background. But I think that it could be very encouraging to families.
There is a question about the difference between having a psychologist in the NICU from social workers. I have a feeling that this is, could be a loaded answer because it depends on the facility that you're at. And so I guess I'll just answer it from our perspective, which is our social workers are much more involved in the logistics of helping families navigate, paperwork and navigate, state interactions and those kind of things. So for us, the NICU psychologist is much more focused on the emotional care of the families and parents. I'm sure that could be different in different places, depending just on sort of resource utilization.
Yeah, we do see it differently in different NICUs and how the NICU psychologist is embedded into the unit and how many hours they have to give to families for individualized therapy sessions throughout the NICU stay. But yes, it does depend a lot on the social care program within that NICU and how many there are. And there's actually a national organization of NICU psychologists now. I don't know if someone want to put that in the chat, but that would be a great resource for NICUs to know about. All right. Any other questions? Did anyone want to share about their journaling experience? We didn't ask that, but if someone wanted to share any insights from that journal experience, I know, like I said, I had a hard time just kind of landing on one. And for me, my takeaway is to slow down this week, to kind of recognize some of the things that are disquieting. I think that we just move through anxiety and worry and the challenges that we face, but also we kind of move so quickly we don't slow down to recognize the beautiful and the impactful and the things that we should take notice of. We do share a lot of stories within our staff chat. It's always beautiful for me. One of the things that stood out to me this morning, we had several celebrations of NICU families going home after long NICU stays. And I think for us to just kind of pause on those and celebrate those. I know as NICU professionals, y'all probably don't have a lot of time to celebrate as babies graduate because you have a brand new baby admission coming in at the same time. But I think for us, we really want to celebrate those NICU graduations and celebrate families going home, but also being fully transparent that a lot of challenges begin as families go home and they're isolated and they're caring for a medically fragile child, and that our support continues well after the NICU and our virtual support groups and our counseling and all of those things for families because like I said, a lot of times we are going on to our own difficult challenges as we're caring for those babies without all of y'all's help and support in the NICU. All right. Well, Dr. Rattray, I told you I waited more than a year and a half patiently for your calendar to be open. It was well worth the wait. I loved your book so much. I have a list of staff already asking that we have a book club to discuss it together and some of the other books that you talked about today. So I think we're going to have a hand-to-hold book club very soon. But I appreciate all your insights. I appreciate your heart. I appreciate how much you care for the families and how you're caring for yourself and encouraging other medical professionals to do so as well. So with that, I thank you so much again for being here and sharing your insights. Up next, we have a quick break that we want to, but we're going to start with a 5-minute mindfulness video. And then we'll be back for our next session at 1 p.m. So with that, I am going to play this mindfulness video, and I hope it
Hi
is
there, everyone. I hope you are enjoying day 1 of Hand to Hold's Maternal Mental Health Conference. Thank you for gifting yourself these next few minutes to relax, unwind, and calm your mind. It is important to remember that you are a priority, and allowing yourself even just a few short minutes of intentional reflection can really have a positive impact on the rest of your day. So let's use these next few minutes to come back to center and set an intention for the rest of your day. Please move into a comfortable position, whether you are seated at your desk at work or you can lie down on your couch at home. Gently close your eyes and shift all of your attention onto your breathing. Taking slower, deeper breaths than you've taken all day so far. Take a breath in through your nose and slowly let it out through your mouth. Continue to breathe this way, feeling your lungs expand as you inhale and contract back in as you exhale. Tune into your body, noticing how it feels. Noticing if there's anything that it's trying to tell you. Notice any places of tension or tightness in your body and give those areas permission to relax, sending love into those areas, sending healing into those areas, sending positivity into those areas. Thank your body for taking such good care of you, and let it know that it is okay to rest and relax for the next few minutes. You may notice that your mind is starting to wander off. That's okay. That's natural. Just notice it and bring your attention back to your body, using your breath as your anchor. Try to reflect on one thing that's happened today that's made you smile, or made you thankful or appreciative. And just let that feeling fill you up for a moment. Breathe that feeling in from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes, and allow yourself to smile and reflect. Now focus on something you can do today, whether it is for yourself or someone else, that will allow you to continue feeling this way. It could be something as small as deciding to go to bed early tonight so that you can finally have time to read that book that's been on your bedside table for months, or the joy of going out to get dinner with a close friend. Think about one thing that you can plan for your day to bring that intentional joy back to it. Now just focus on that for a few minutes. Sit in that feeling of peace and joy while you practice your deep breaths. Now, let's take a few more deep breaths together. A deep breath in, feeling your lungs expand out as you inhale, and everything contract back in as you exhale. Again, an even deeper breath than the one before, holding that breath for a beat, and exhaling everything out. Last time, your deepest breath yet, sending that breath through your entire body and exhaling it out. And on your own time, slowly bringing awareness back to where you are and thanking yourself for taking these few minutes to be intentional and kind to yourself. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes and go about enjoying the rest of your day. Thank you for your time this afternoon.